You know, we usually take for granted that our bodies just sort of intuitively know what to do.
Right, yeah, like on autopilot.
Exactly. I mean, think about walking down a flight of stairs in the dark. You don't have to stare at your feet to know where they are in space.
Yeah, you'd probably trip if you did.
Right. Your foot reaches out. It feels the solid resistance of the floorboard. And your ankle just makes this micro adjustment. Your knee bends to absorb the weight.
It's all happening in, like, fractions of a second.
Literally fractions of a second. Your brain and your muscles are communicating completely beneath your conscious awareness. It feels entirely automatic. It's what we casually call muscle memory.
Yeah, that biological conversation.
But what happens when that conversation slowly goes silent? Today, for all of you listening, our fellow learners out there, we are looking at amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS.
A truly devastating condition.
It really is. It's a condition where that vital internal dialogue breaks down. And we are exploring a radical new idea today that suggests we might have been treating this silence, the wrong way.
Completely the wrong way, potentially.
Welcome to today's deep dive. It is Tuesday, June 2, 2026, and our source for today is a brand new, frankly fascinating position paper. It's titled IsoTone Lite and IsoTone Micro as Low-Load, Feedback-Rich Adjuncts to ALS Rehabilitation by Dr. Levne Moten at N5 Digital, Inc. Okay, let's unpack this.
It is a profound piece of writing because it's not just introducing a new piece of technology. It is fundamentally challenging the entire philosophy of physical therapy for one of the most notoriously difficult neurodegenerative diseases we know of.
Right, because for decades, the focus in ALS rehab has often been on just like trying to maintain raw strength, right?
Exactly, just trying to force weakened muscles to keep working against a failing nervous system.
Which is incredibly frustrating for patients. I mean, they are fighting a battle that the biology just won't let them win.
Yeah, it's a losing battle from the start with that approach.
So the mission for this deep dive is to explore how this paper shifts the focus entirely. It asks the seemingly simple question, what if we stop focusing solely on the commands the brain is sending down to the muscle and start engaging the hidden feedback loops the muscle sends back up?
That's the real game changer here.
Yeah. Whether you are a medical professional, someone touched by ALS, or just someone fascinated by how the human body communicates with itself, this paper fundamentally changes how you think about human tissue.
It really does. But, to really grasp why this paper is such a massive paradigm shift, we kind of have to look at the biology of ALS first.
Right. Let's lay the groundwork.
So it's a progressive neurodegenerative disease, and it specifically targets motor neurons. That's both the upper motor neurons in the brain and the lower motor neurons in the spinal cord.
Okay, upper and lower.
Yeah. You can think of the upper motor neurons as like the managers and the lower motor neurons as the workers on the factory floor.
I like that analogy.
Right. And when these neurons degenerate and die, the muscles they innervate literally stop receiving the signal to contract.
The managers stop calling down to the floor.
Exactly. And that silence leads to advancing weakness, profound muscle atrophy, loss of motor control, and eventually respiratory compromise.
So under that old model, the temptation is to use the classic, the radio tower and receiver analogy.
Oh, yeah, the one-way street.
Right. We assume the brain is a radio tower broadcasting a signal, and the muscle is just this dumb receiver picking it up. In ALS, the tower's signal is fading, so the music stops playing.
Yeah, but we really need to throw out that old radio analogy.
Push back on me here. Why is that wrong?
Because it's just completely inadequate. I mean, the author of this paper argues that the human nervous system isn't a one-way broadcast at all. It's more like a modern smart grid.
Oh, interesting. A smart grid.
Yeah. We usually think of the brain as the power plant and the muscle as a light bulb, right? Just a one-way flow of electricity. But the body's grid is bidirectional.
So the muscle is doing something too.
Exactly. The muscle is like a solar-equipped home. It receives power, sure, but it also generates its own data and sends it back to the grid to, regulate the whole system.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to frame it. The solar home is still capable of pinging the power plant.
Precisely. And that pinging is happening constantly. Even when the outgoing command pathway, the motor output from the brain, is failing due to ALS, the sensory pathways coming from the body are often still largely intact.
The data is still flowing back up.
Yes. When a healthy muscle stretches, when it contracts, when it bears a load, or even when it changes temperature, an enormous amount of sensory information is generated.
We have specialized sensors for all that, don't we?
We do. Highly specialized receptors. Deep within the muscle fibers, we have muscle spindles that detect minute changes in muscle length and how fast that length is changing.
Okay.
Down in the tendons connecting muscle to bone, we have Golgi tendon organs that sense mechanical tension. On the surface, we have cutaneous mechanoreceptors in our skin that feel pressure and texture.
And all of these are constantly firing information upstream.
Yep, through peripheral nerves, right back to the spinal cord and the brain.
That's proprioception. It's the physical data that lets you walk down those stairs in the dark, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. It's how the nervous system maintains that real-time 3D awareness of position, force, and motion.
Okay, so understanding that sensory loop brings us to the absolute core tension in ALS rehabilitation. Because physical therapists face what they call a terrifying rehabilitation gap.
It is a precarious tightrope walk, to say the least.
Right, there's this incredibly narrow therapeutic window. If an ALS patient does too little, if they just, stop moving entirely out of fear of causing damage, they suffer devastating secondary consequences.
Yeah, rapid cardiovascular deconditioning, severe joint stiffness.
Which makes total sense. If you don't move a joint, the body assumes you don't need it, and everything just locks up.
You get permanently reduced range of motion, poor posture. Immobility creates its own rapid cascade of decline.
But the tragedy is, you can't just hand an ALS patient a dumbbell and tell them to push through the weakness to prevent that stiffness.
Oh, no, you absolutely cannot. That is the fatal flaw of the traditional strength training mindset when applied to this disease.
Why is it so dangerous?
Because partially denervated muscles that have lost a significant portion of their nerve supply, are incredibly fragile. If you place a heavy traditional load on them, you induce a phenomenon known clinically as overwork weakness.
Overwork weakness.
Yeah, you are basically demanding more mechanical work from the few surviving motor units than they can biologically handle.
They just burn out.
They do. It accelerates their failure.
Yeah.
You cause deep fatigue, severe pain, and potentially permanent loss of function. You are literally destroying the very tissue you are trying to save.
Wow. So we have this seemingly impossible puzzle. Heavy exercise is actively dangerous and destroys surviving nerves. But inactivity causes crippling joint stiffness and deconditioning.
Right, you're caught in the middle. So how do we safely tap into that upstream feedback grid? How do we talk to the nervous system and give it that rich proprioceptive data without exhausting the muscle?
And this is where Dr. Namoten's paper introduces a fascinating mechanical intervention, the IsoTone Lite and the IsoTone Micro.
Okay, let's talk about these.
So these are compact, highly specialized, lightweight devices developed by N5 Digital. But, to your point about the puzzle of overwork weakness, these are absolutely not your average gym weights.
Okay, I have to put on my skeptical hat here, though. The paper technically classifies IsoTone as a resistance device. If we just spent the last 5 minutes establishing that putting a resistance load on weakened ALS muscles is exactly what triggers overwork weakness, how is this safe?
What's fascinating here is that the word resistance in this clinical context does not mean what it means in a commercial gym.
Oh, okay.
We are not talking about fixed external weights. If you pick up a 10-pound dumbbell, gravity ensures it weighs 10 pounds regardless of how exhausted your bicep is.
Right, gravity doesn't care if you're tired. Exactly. That is a fixed, unrelenting load. The IsoTone devices operate on a completely different biomechanical principle called adaptive resistance.
I love this concept. Let's make this really visceral for the listener.
Sure.
Think about moving your hand through a swimming pool. If you shove your hand through the water as hard and fast as you can, the water pushes back with immense force. It feels like hitting a wall, right?
Yep.
But if you gently, slowly glide your hand through that exact same water, it parts easily, providing only a tiny, smooth amount of friction. The water is adapting to you. That's adaptive resistance, right?
That is the perfect analogy. The resistance in the IsoTone device isn't generated by gravity pulling on a metal plate or like a heavy spring.
So what generates it?
It is generated dynamically by the force the user applies to the device in real time. It shapes itself moment by moment to the patient's own functional capacity.
So it changes as they use it.
Yes. If a patient is having a good day and applies 2 pounds of force, the device pushes back with 2 pounds. If 10 seconds later they fatigue and can only exert 2 ounces of force, the device instantly drops to 2 ounces of resistance.
Oh, wow. So it is virtually impossible to accidentally overload the muscle because the resistance cannot physically exceed what the patient is actively, safely producing.
Exactly. It removes the danger of the fixed weight entirely. But the paper emphasizes another mechanical difference that is arguably even more crucial for neurorehabilitation.
What's that?
Bidirectional engagement.
This is where we move away from typical stress relief toys. I mean, if you squeeze a standard foam stress ball, you use your flexor muscles to crush it, right?
Yeah.
But when you let go, the foam just passively springs back and pushes your hand open. The release requires zero effort.
Right. The release is entirely passive, but IsoTone is engineered so that both the compression and the expansion require controlled, deliberate effort.
It fights you both ways.
Exactly. You squeeze the device, and then you have to actively, gently pull it back open. It's a continuous, controlled squeeze-expand cycle.
Okay, I want you, the listener, to picture holding this small, smooth device between your hands.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on how hard you can squeeze it like some grip strength tester, you are focusing entirely on how smoothly you can compress it over, say, a slow 5-second count.
Smoothness is key.
Right. And then how seamlessly you could reverse that neuromuscular command and pull it back out over another 5 seconds. You aren't trying to build a bicep. You are trying to create a highly focused sensory motor event.
And physiologically, because it's bidirectional, you are engaging reciprocal muscle groups.
Meaning both sides of the arm.
Yes, the agonist muscles that close the hand and the antagonist muscles that open the hand are both participating in this controlled loop, and you are doing this in a very tiny range of motion.
Which is important for these patients.
Crucial. The paper notes this is perfect for patients dealing with severe fatigue or who have balance limitations and need to remain securely seated.
So we've solved the mechanical feedback with that fluid, adaptive squeeze-expand motion. But ALS doesn't just rob you of strength. It distorts how muscles feel and behave in their environment.
Yeah, the sensory experience changes dramatically.
Right. So how does the device address the complex biological realities on the ground? The paper breaks down several practical applications, right? Moving from mechanical feedback to addressing the actual physical agony of the disease. Let's look at Module A first.
Yeah, let's look at how the device answers those specific biological problems. When a patient is performing that slow squeeze-expand movement, the primary goal is generating proprioceptive feedback and training motor smoothness.
Okay.
The patient sits upright, holds the device, and focuses entirely on the control of the movement. But there is a detail in the clinical methodology that is deeply insightful.
The part about the tremors.
Yes. The author writes that if an ALS patient experiences a tremor, shaking, or a sudden loss of smooth force during this movement, the therapist treats it as vital data, not as failure.
That reframing is so powerful because, I mean, in a traditional fitness mindset, if your arms are shaking while lifting something, you are failing the rep. Your muscles are giving out.
You're pushed too far, yeah.
But in this neuromuscular framework, a tremor is just rich sensory information lighting up the grid. It is the nervous system revealing its current real-time limits.
Exactly.
By paying close, mindful attention to that tremor, the patient is sending high-quality data back to the brain. Like, here is exactly where the force wavers. Here is the specific angle where control drops.
It's a form of deliberate attention. It reinforces whatever residual sensor-motor maps still exist in the brain. But, as you mentioned, mechanical control is only one part of the suffering.
Right, there's a lot of pain involved.
Unfortunately, yes. ALS patients frequently endure agonizing muscle cramps, sudden spasms, and severe localized tissue stiffness.
And this is where the device's secondary features come in, looking at modules C and D. It's not just a resistance piston. The IsoTone features a ball handle and a cylindrical portion specifically designed to apply gentle, rhythmic massage along cramp-prone muscle fibers.
But we have to be incredibly specific about the why and how here.
Yeah. Clarify that for us.
The paper is adamant that ALS muscles are fragile and neurologically hypersensitive. The aggressive, deep tissue sports massage you might use to work out a knot in a healthy runner's calf, that is totally contraindicated here.
Oh, it hurt them.
It would cause severe damage. The goal is gentle, superficial mechanoreceptor stimulation.
Because light touch can actually interrupt the pain signals. It sort of distracts the nervous system.
Exactly.
But it doesn't just rely on pressure. The device also generates warmth after light use. Why is mild thermal feedback so important for a muscle that is losing its nerve connection?
Well, it comes down to basic vascular biology and neurology. Mild heat causes vasodilation.
It opens up the blood vessels.
Right. It gently widens the blood vessels, increasing local blood flow to the starving tissue. But more importantly, mild warmth has a soothing effect on hyperexcitable motor neurons.
So it calms the nerves down.
Yes. The dying nerves in ALS often fire erratically, which is what causes those cramps. Applying mild thermal feedback during gentle massage can actually ease that motor neuron excitability. It helps with tissue pliability and local circulation, making the muscle more receptive before any gentle stretching is attempted.
It's fascinating how interconnected it all is.
Mhm.
And that interconnectivity brings us to one of the most critical challenges in later stage ALS, respiratory compromise.
Yeah, that's a very difficult stage.
As the disease progresses, the muscles controlling the lungs, particularly the diaphragm, begin to weaken, which is, frankly, terrifying for the patient.
Absolutely terrifying.
So under Module E, the author addresses this by proposing a protocol that ties the physical movement of the IsoTone device directly to the patient's breath. The patient gently compresses the device during a slow, controlled exhale and actively expands it during a slow inhale.
But, and this is crucial to be clear, the goal here isn't to build lung capacity or strengthen the diaphragm, right?
Right, because just like the biceps, you can't forcefully train ALS respiratory muscles without causing overwork weakness.
Exactly. You cannot treat the diaphragm like a muscle you can bulk up. The biological mechanism at play here is much more subtle. By synchronizing the micro-movement with the breath, you are tapping into the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve, that's the major nerve that controls the parasympathetic nervous system, right?
Yeah.
The rest and digest calming system.
Yes. Slow, focused exhalations stimulate the vagus nerve, which calms the autonomic nervous system.
Oh, I see.
It reduces the panic and anxiety that naturally accompany breathing difficulties. Furthermore, the physical act of expanding the device while inhaling naturally encourages a more upright, open thoracic posture.
So it just mechanically opens up the chest.
Right. It supports chest mobility and a sense of calm bodily awareness without ever pushing the fragile respiratory muscles to the point of exhaustion.
Wow. When you step back and look at all of this together, it is a masterclass in multimodal sensory integration.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are not just lifting a weight.
Not at all.
We are combining load feedback from the adaptive water-like resistance, tactile feedback from the grip, thermal vasodilation from the warmth, pain-interrupting mechanoreceptor stimulation from the gentle massage, and autonomic calming from the breath synchronization.
All at the same time.
It is a massive sensory package delivered in one low-risk routine, all designed to preserve the surviving motor units and reduce secondary symptoms like cramps and fasciculations.
Fasciculations being those involuntary, visible muscle twitches that are so common and distressing in ALS.
Exactly. It's an elegant hypothesis. But, as with all medical hypotheses, it must survive contact with reality.
Which naturally raises a glaring question. If we are bombarding fragile, hypersensitive, dying ALS tissue with heat, massage, and physical resistance, even adaptive resistance, isn't there a massive risk of accidentally overwhelming the nervous system and triggering the exact spasms and fatigue we are trying to prevent?
It's a very valid concern.
So how does Dr. Nemotin ensure this doesn't backfire?
Well,
This brings us to the safety protocols and the proposed pilot study. And honestly, here's where it gets really interesting, because the author is remarkably restrained. This is where the paper earns its scientific credibility.
yeah, in a world of medical technology where everyone wants to claim they have a miraculous breakthrough or a disruptive cure, this position paper is incredibly grounded.
He explicitly states multiple times that this does not regenerate lost motor neurons. It is absolutely not a cure.
He writes that any claim of actually slowing the underlying progression of ALS remains a distant research question, not a marketing statement.
That's refreshing to hear.
It really is. The strongest defensible claim right now is simply function preservation. Keeping the patient as mobile and comfortable as possible for as long as possible, and reducing that secondary deterioration caused by immobility.
That kind of intellectual honesty is exactly what you want to see before introducing a new variable to a highly vulnerable patient population. So let's talk about the specific guardrails he puts in place to prevent that overstimulation risk I mentioned. Safety is central to the entire 8 to 12-week pilot study proposal.
First and foremost, this requires direct ALS-clinic or specialized physical therapy supervision.
So you can't just do this at home.
No, this is not a gadget you just order online, unbox in your living room, and figure out yourself. The overseeing physical therapist has to deeply understand the erratic progression of ALS.
And there are strict non-negotiable stop conditions, right?
Oh, absolutely. If a patient experiences post-session weakness, meaning they are objectively weaker immediately after using the device than they were before they started the session halts.
They just stop immediately.
Yes. And they are particularly vigilant about delayed fatigue.
Wait, what's delayed fatigue?
Delayed fatigue is a critical, often missed marker in ALS rehabilitation. Because of how the nervous system compensates, a patient might feel totally fine and energized during the session, but then wake up the next day completely exhausted, unable to lift their arm.
Oh, wow, so it sneaks up on them.
Exactly. That delayed reaction means the dose of sensory and mechanical input was far too high. To prevent this, the paper insists on multiple, very short microsessions throughout the week rather than one long, fatiguing traditional therapy block.
That makes a lot of sense. And there are also strict exclusion criteria for who should even attempt this in the pilot program.
Yes, safety dictates who can participate. Patients with severe cognitive impairment who cannot provide reliable, real-time feedback about how they are feeling are excluded.
Right, because they need to be able to communicate if something hurts.
Exactly. Patients with unstable respiratory status or severe spasticity that is instantly triggered by light touch are also excluded. And for those in the advanced late stages of the disease where passive palliative comfort care is the absolute priority, this intervention is not appropriate for them.
It's just too late in the progression.
Right. It is highly targeted at early and moderate stage patients who still retain at least anti-gravity muscle strength.
Meaning they still have enough neural connection to at least lift their arm or leg against the natural downward pull of gravity.
Exactly. They have enough surviving architecture to engage the feedback loop.
So how do we objectively measure if this highly controlled, gentle feedback grid is actually doing anything? What are the physiological indicators of success in this pilot study?
Well, because it's a pilot study, the primary endpoints are simply safety and tolerability. Can ALS patients use this multimodal device without experiencing adverse events?
First, do no harm.
Exactly. But the secondary outcomes are where the science gets rigorous. They propose tracking functional measures over the 12 weeks using the ALS-FRS-R.
And that's a scale.
Yeah, that's the globally recognized functional rating scale for ALS. They want to use grip dynamometry to carefully measure if baseline strength is being preserved longer than expected.
They also propose using surface EMG electromyography during those squeeze-expand cycles.
Yes, surface EMG involves placing non-invasive sensors on the skin over the muscles.
Little sticky pads.
Yeah, it allows researchers to objectively measure the actual electrical activity firing within the muscle tissue. They can look at the data and ask, are the electrical firing patterns becoming smoother over time? Is the erratic force control variability improving?
That would be amazing to see.
And crucially, they suggest logging daily cramp frequency and intensity.
Which is huge. I mean, if this gentle multimodal feedback can simply reduce the sheer physical agony of daily cramps and fasciculations, that alone is a massive quality of life victory, even if it doesn't change the ultimate trajectory of the disease.
It's giving them some comfort.
Right. Synthesizing all of this, the paper is asking the simple but vital questions first. It's not asking, can we cure ALS tomorrow? It's asking what precise dose of sensory feedback is tolerated by a dying nerve. Does thermal feedback actually reduce stiffness? Does adaptive resistance preserve motor control smoothness without triggering overwork weakness?
It is charting a completely new path, moving away from the unhelpful extremes of traditional ALS care. On one side, you have the tragedy of passive decline doing absolutely nothing out of a paralyzing fear of causing damage.
Right.
And on the other side, you have the danger of aggressive, harmful strength training. This paper stakes out a scientific middle ground controlled, feedback-guided, multimodal sensory stimulation.
So to summarize the core journey we've taken today, we started with a terrifying progressive disease, ALS, that destroys the outgoing command pathway from the brain. The body's managers stopped talking to the factory workers. But rather than fighting a losing battle on that one-way street, this deep dive explored how we might utilize the incoming sensory pathways. Through low-load, feedback-rich stimulation with the IsoTone Lite and Micro using the fluid physics of adaptive resistance, bidirectional movement, thermal vasodilation, and vagal nerve breathing synchronization, patients might be able to maintain their mobility, their comfort, and their connection to their own bodies.
And do it without risking overwork weakness.
Exactly.
For me, the most profound takeaway from Dr. Nemotin's work is the fundamental conceptual shift in how we view human tissue itself.
How so?
We have to stop viewing muscles simply as a dumb endpoint, the passive, silent recipient of a failing neural command. Muscle is an active, brilliant biological signaling organ.
It's part of the conversation.
Yes. It is highly capable of communicating mechanically, thermally, and neurologically with whatever neural circuits still survive in the spinal cord and brain. An external device can't magically replace dead neurons, but it can absolutely support and optimize the living tissue that remains, keeping the conversation going for as long as possible.
And that leaves us, and you the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up today. If this pilot study moves forward, And if we can conclusively prove that muscles act as these vital, active signaling organs capable of sending life-sustaining feedback to the brain, even when the brain's outgoing commands are failing, what does that mean for the future of human health?
It opens up so many doors.
Right. Could this two-way street principle eventually revolutionize how we treat other devastating neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's or
MS.
Or, zooming out even further to something that will eventually affect all of us, could this entirely change how we approach the natural muscle degradation, frailty, and loss of balance that comes with standard aging? If the body is always listening, even when it's struggling to speak, maybe we just need to learn a much better, gentler way to communicate with it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating intersection of technology, biology, and rehabilitation. Until our next exploration, keep learning and take care of yourselves.